Welcome to the Abridged Presidential Histories with Kenny Ryan, episode 26E, an interview on TR's post-presidency and the Great War with David Pietrusa. I'm excited to welcome David Pietrusa to the show today. David is an award-winning historian who has written numerous books about the presidency, including TR's Last War, Theodore Roosevelt, The Great War, and A Journey of Triumph and Tragedy, which focuses on Theodore Roosevelt's attempts to get the United States and himself into World War I. Today, we'll be focusing on that and the entire TR post-presidency as we discuss the final chapters of Roosevelt's life. David, thank you so much for joining me.
Good to be here.
So, a solid Teddy Roosevelt factoid is that Theodore is the youngest person to ever become president of the United States. He was 42 when he was sworn in, and that also means he is the youngest person to ever become a former president. He was 50.
A living former president.
A living former president. I know, I double-checked that earlier. I'm like, nope, Kennedy, Garfield, you don't count. Sorry.
Right.
He was 50 when he leaves office. What did TR
keep in mind, Franklin is 51 when he enters the White House.
That's a fantastic comparison stat on the fifth cousins, once removed. So what did TR think he was going to do when he's like, yeah, I'm going to retire after 8 years? He didn't have to. You know, there was no mandate yet. What did he think he was going to do?
No, but he had shot his mouth off.
Yeah.
like a number of other presidents. Buchanan, who he did not usually cite Buchanan positively.
Absolutely not.
Buchanan and Wilson and sometimes Taft were like the three worst guys in history to him. But Buchanan said he wasn't going to run again when he was elected. And when Roosevelt is elected he's only elected once,
right?
Because he almost has a full 8 years, but not quite. And he is elected in the big landslide in 1904, and he says, I'm not going to run again. And his wife is like face palm and like, why did you say that? It's like, it seemed like a good idea at the time. But you know, that's never good because it makes you a lame duck.
Yeah. And
lame ducks, I was a lame duck for a few months, and you know, your influence wanes and you wonder if you can get anything done. Mm-hmm. Particularly, you know, really at the end when your bag is packed. So what's he gonna do? And what's he gonna do is he's got to make a living.
Yeah. He's
got to make a living. Now, he had inherited enough money to live on for the rest of his life from his father, but that little adventure he has in North Dakota, where he loses most of his cattle in a blizzard, shoots that plan to hell.
Yeah.
And he's been on the government payroll just about his entire adult life. He was elected to this New York State Assembly at 22. Mm-hmm. Was like minority leader or something, you know, majority leader at 2 years later or something. And then he's police commissioner, civil service commissioner under Benjamin Harrison and Grover Cleveland. Mm-hmm. Assistant Secretary of the Navy. So this is your, you know, this is your career bureaucrat guy, okay? Which you don't think of him, the great adventurer, as this, but he is. And so he's making money on that. He's also making money writing books. He writes books early and like voting in New York or Chicago, vote early and often.
Yep.
And so he writes early and often. And so he's got to write more books. He gets jobs editing, editor-in-chief of magazines like Metropolitan Magazine a few years later, quite a few years later, like 1914 at $25,000 a year, which isn't bad. He's working for the Outlook magazine. So he's think of Churchill. This is very much like Churchill in the 30s, where Churchill has to write articles and books just to keep things up.
Yeah.
William Howard Taft isn't sure what he's going to do when he leaves the White House. It's like, maybe I could argue before the Supreme be in a federal court. No, I appointed all those guys. I can't. So he gets a job at Yale. Yale gives him a job, and he's like, you know, happy until he goes back on the government payroll.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my short long answer as to what he was. And then of course he was going to go out and might kill large numbers of animals and explore the Amazon. And I don't think those things are, when he's leaving, the African expedition is on the books.
Yes.
He's able to do that because it's funded by the Museum of Natural History, and the which is another story for today, but they took his statue down, and the Andrew Carnegie puts the money up, and he would have never had quite the funding he had if he wasn't president until those opportunities came forward, and then he goes off and explores the Amazon after he blows the Republican Party sky high in 1912.
It's kind of like when he leaves the White House, you could almost summarize it as he starts looking for ways to get himself killed in exciting ways. He goes to Africa.
He's really
Amazon. He wants to go to War.
Yes.
But let's start with Africa. What is the inspiration? Is this part of, I need to write books? I'm going to write books about Africa. You mentioned he's going to kill a ton of animals.
There's 11,000 creatures, large and all creatures, great and small, who do not survive this trip. And from little insects to elephants and rhinoceri and every other thing are really stuffing and bringing these things back. It takes years for them to process them. So that's a big part of it. He's a big birder. Yeah. I think his first book as a kid is on birds of Long Island. Huh. One of the last communications he has is he's just read a book on birds, and he writes to someone, and he's really correcting some very fine point. He's deathly sick. Yeah, he's gonna die, and he's taking the time to do this, and it's not some small point. He knows it. Of course, he has this photographic memory, so he remembers everything and is often not shy about letting people know he remembers everything, and that is a great skill to have in politics.
Yeah.
If I was, I got elected once. And with the worst memory for faces on the East Coast. It was not, it was pulling that off was not easy in a ward race. And because, if you just look at people blankly, it doesn't, it's not so good. But if you can remember, I met you 8 years ago in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like you blow their socks off. It's like, whoa.
Your daughter was with me. He could do that.
Yeah.
And people say, he cares about me. He just remembers everything.
Yeah.
But that makes an incredible impression on people. So he's got that skill, and also the fact that he's going to sell things as this is the most important issue in the world. This is we got to do this, and you talk about Wilson's self-righteousness and all this, and being able to change positions on a dime. It's TR can do it. Can match him issue for issue. There must have been something going on back then in the teens.
So TR, he runs off on the safari. Can you tell me a little bit more about this? I mean, he kills a tremendous number of animals. Is there anything to be like an insight to be gleaned about Roosevelt's personality from this experience or anything like that?
No, in a way it was, that was the thing which was kind of at odds with the rest of his post-presidency. Well, he was always, there's one of the earliest Groucho Marx songs is, "Hello, I must be going. I cannot stay." Something goes on like this, and he's not. And Roosevelt is always saying, "I'm washed up in politics. I'm through with politics. This is the end. They don't want me anymore." But where he really carries through on it is with that African expedition, where I am really going to stay out of William Howard Taft's way. I'm going to go as far away as possible, and you won't even be able to reach me sometimes. And then, however, he comes up through Egypt, and that is when the King Edward of the Seventh of the United Kingdom, to be precise, kicks the bucket, and they have this amazing funeral, which is chronicled in Barbara Tuchman's book on the beginning of the First World War, where all the crowned heads of Europe are there.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he makes the tour. He meets with Franz Josef and Wilhelm. He never thought much of Wilhelm,
Right.
the second, and probably two boisterous personalities coming together. Churchill and Roosevelt. TR met at one point. They did not care for each other.
Huh.
So he's able to be Mr. America at that point. But at that point, while he's still in Europe, Gifford Pinchot comes over, and the Taft administration is beginning to collapse. And the issues between the forestry debates and the tariff. Roosevelt would make noises about reforming the tariff, but the smart play is, no matter how you feel about it, is to just leave it alone.
Mm-hmm.
Uncle Joe Cannon had this Cannon rule, which was every time you mess with the tariff, no matter what you do, you're going to create this uncertainty. Okay. People don't know what to buy. People don't know what to manufacture, what the prices are going to be coming. You get all this log rolling, and often you see these big economic downturns occur, right after the tariff is changed. So Roosevelt will talk reform with the tariff, and he's smart enough not to go near it. Taft talks about it, does something, it gets into the Congress, and it comes out like it always does. And everyone gets mad at everybody. So that's a big part of it. And Taft double crosses TR in that he says he's going to keep his cabinet on. And he keeps two members on. And okay, what was that about, Bill? That's not a good way to get off on the right foot to your old pal and the guy who made you, the president.
Oh, absolutely.
But that's a bit like Al Smith and FDR as governor of New York. It's like, I'm in charge now. You're not. Go away.
100%. But I mean, the first thing that comes to mind from everything you just said is, I don't think there's a room in the world big enough to fit Churchill and TR's personalities.
No, that's it. Or, yeah.
And also, it's deliciously ironic how you put it, that he left to go to Africa to get out of Taft's way, and him getting out of Taft's way doesn't even last till he's back in the United States, really. Because as you mentioned, like Pinchot comes over, he starts seeing these news, he immediately starts getting upset. Can you elaborate on what's going to cause the friction and what's ultimately going to lead TR to say, you know what, I'm running for president in 1912?
Well, he gets more. I guess the times are changing, and it's always the question of, okay, I'm the leader, and am I leading the charge, or am I running to get in front of the crowd, of the movement?
Yeah.
And so, for whatever reason, the country is moving more and more progressive. And then he becomes more and more progressive with, initiative and referendum and more trust busting. Oh, one of the big things which ticks TR off against Taft is antitrust. Now, he's the big trust buster, but in nearly 8 years, he brings 40 cases, and Taft in 4 years brings like 80. And it's not that Taft has outshone him so much that in that way that TR is upset about, but he brings a case against United States Steel. And that is impacting. One of the things in the suit is how TR, in order to avert the panic of 1907, works with Morgan, and they allow him to have this Tennessee Coal and Oil Company or whatever, and amalgamate that into U.S. Steel and make it even bigger. And TR says that's a personal insult to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what really made it personal in regard to the big breakup there. So you had all of those factors involved, and so it's not just one thing. And I always say, if you're looking for something, as to why somebody does something, don't just look for one reason. There might be a flashpoint, but
Yeah.
usually people do things for a bunch of reasons in the sum total of their existence.
So the sum
And
total of this leads TR to run, and 1912 ends up being a really interesting election year. Let's start with, it's the first year, if I remember right, of presidential primaries.
basically,
Yeah, not
yeah,
every state
I
had
think
one.
exactly because maybe Alton B. Parker won a couple. I don't know.
Yeah,
Certainly TR wasn't being challenged in 1904 or
right.
in
Right.
1908. I don't think there are much of any.
I don't
It's
think on either side.
1912.
Yeah,
So
and not every
it's
state
only a
has one.
handful.
Yeah, but the ones that
Not
have, like, if I remember right, like, they mostly go for TR, but Taft is still going to win the party's name nation. So can you break down for me how it works? Like, because we haven't had primaries, we're starting to have them. So how does politics work back then? That there are limited primaries, TR wins most of them, but Taft still wins the nomination.
Well, because we live in a federal system, and the states are the laboratory of democracy. They don't do everything all at once. They don't put women's suffrage all at once, or
Right.
prohibition,
Yeah.
or whatever issues are facing America right now. And so they didn't put the primaries in all at once. And we still don't have, well, I mean, we have
Yeah, we got
primaries in
caucuses.
every
Good
state
point.
now, but,
Yeah.
some are more important than others.
Yeah.
There's no primaries in the South then for president, and,
Mhm.
wouldn't have, it would have been 6 people versus 5 people in a Republican primary in Georgia back then. um, and Roosevelt wins most of the primaries. Taft wins 2.
Mhm.
It's interesting that both candidates beat the other guy in their home state.
Yes. Yeah.
Roosevelt is they've known Roosevelt long enough in New York to not quite love him,
He has
and
such a fascinating
and
relationship in New York.
so Taft beats him there early
Yeah.
on, and
Yeah.
then the last primary is Roosevelt beats Taft in Ohio.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, Taft has also won in Massachusetts,
Hmm.
and he has and La Follette is running, and
Right.
he
Right.
wins in Wisconsin, of course, and some other place
Yeah.
out there in
He's
the
a senator
prairies.
from Wisconsin, right?
He is the senator from
Progressive guy.
Wisconsin,
Yeah.
and he was really the one of the first major progressives, and he's going to run on the progressive ticket in 1924.
Yeah. 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 Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
We'll
he's
see
that
him
guy,
again.
and then he's gonna drop dead because he's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And so in 1912, La
Yeah.
Follette wants to run, and
Hmm.
La Follette, there's a group of Republican progressives coalescing around him, and he's kind of getting off to a start, and then Roosevelt is saying, no, 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 I don't want to run, no, not me, no. But Frank Knox, who ran with Landon in 1936, is a newspaper editor in Michigan,
Hmm.
and Roosevelt says, why don't you round up a bunch of Republican governors to ask me to run? And he does,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, I guess I'll run.
Yeah.
And then basically most of the progressives desert La Follette,
Yeah.
but also La Follette goes bananas one night
Yeah.
at a dinner for newspaper publishers in Philadelphia. There's a big convention, and he gets up there and has a complete meltdown and goes on for hours, just repeating himself, talking in circles and insulting all the newspaper publishers. And
Ooh.
people go, no,
Yeah. Not a good
not
idea.
this guy. And then
Yeah.
TR announces, and at one point he says, I'm not going to run third party. And well, that does not last, because there's no war like a civil war. There's
And hold
there's
on. And before we,
no
yeah.
there's no new enemy like an old friend.
So before we jump into that, I want to sort of go back. So if some states are doing primaries, how did the other states appoint their delegates?
Oh,
How?
well, yeah,
Yeah.
those other states. TR had kind of set up a system in 1908 because not every Republican was like Bill Taft, that fat guy from the Philippines. You know, do we really? I don't know. Can we do better? And it's like, no, he's my guy, my
Yeah.
Bill.
Yeah.
And so he basically rigs it for Taft to get in.
Yeah.
And one of the ways they do that, and one of the ways which had been in operation for a while, is you had the basic rotten boroughs of the Republican Party in the South.
Hmm.
So all these guys, you would have splits uh, between the lily white factions and the black and tans.
Can you define what do you mean lily white, black, and tans?
Well, even though people are like Republicans and they had like been, on the same side in Reconstruction in the South, there were still white people in the South and black people in the South, even though they were Republicans. And white said we should control this party, and the black said no, we should control this party.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and they had some really fisticuffs in 1920 in Georgia between who was going to be the Republicans going to the national convention.
Wow.
So you get the and when you have a Republican Party which is basically not non-existent, who's going to be controlling it is the people, and the people that are there, the few people that are there are going to be appointed postmaster. Being appointed postmaster was a big thing back then. That's where the patronage was.
Yep.
So if Bill Taft has appointed all the postmasters, they're going to be for him.
Mm-hmm.
And TR, one of the planks of the 1912 progressive platform, is no federal office holders shall be delegates. Okay. Also, he's so ticked off by the black Taft delegates at the Republican convention in 1912 that he bans black delegates from the South from the progressive convention in 1912. He has a very
wow
zigzaggy record on race.
Yeah. Yes, he does. Yeah, he does.
And sometimes it's towards the end of its life, he's really there's a East St. Louis riot in 1917, which is brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he really goes off on that topic. At a speech, we've as we're recording this, we've just seen an incident at the Oscars.
Yes.
At Carnegie Hall, Roosevelt, and the rally is to talk about the revolution in Russia and basically have democracy in Russia and to keep them in the war, which is what they really care about.
Right.
And on the stage is Samuel Gompers, who's the head of the American Federation of Labor. And Roosevelt says, before we talk about Russia, I got to talk about what's going on in this country. This is a terrible thing in East St. Louis. We should not allow this. It's like the pogroms in Russia, and I wouldn't defend those. And I'm not going to defend this. And Gompers is saying, well, maybe we should have an investigation in this because it's the union members who have basically been going out and burning all the black houses down and killing them.
Oh, my God.
In East St. Louis, because they were source of cheap labor. Why do blacks move north in World War? There's Rosie the Riveter in World War II, right?
Yeah.
Wars disrupt things.
Yeah.
So the cheap source of labor of immigrants, like my people, can't come in during the First World War.
Right.
But you can't get there from here anymore.
Right.
Okay. So what are you going to do if you've got a business in Chicago or East St. Louis or something? That's when the black migration starts.
Yeah.
Okay. So Roosevelt says, I don't want to hear about any excuses. I don't want to hear about any investigations. Okay. And he starts to almost to punch out Samuel Gompers, the head of the American Federation of Labor, on stage at Carnegie Hall.
Wow.
And he says, "Oh, it was just a slap. It was nothing. It was a tap." And then he's out. He's getting in his car. "Oh, I wish I could lay hands on him. I'd tear him apart." Samuel Gompers is 5'4". I mean,
Yeah. Goodness. Okay. So, so TR, before he gets to all that, we're still
excitable.
We're still in the selection of 1912. He's very excitable. And talking about excitable, he gets very excitable when the convention goes for Taft and Taft gets nominated.
The guy he really liked from his cabinet was not Taft.
Yeah.
The guy he liked was Elihu Root.
Yeah.
And Root he said, "This is the greatest cabinet guy since Hamilton. He's just wonderful."
Mm-hmm.
And but Root was a little too conservative, and he was too old, and he didn't want it. So he was not the candidate in 1908. And so Root is the chairman of the convention, and he rules that all the convention contested delegates
in 1912.
Taft.
Yeah.
Okay. And this to Roosevelt is like absolutely corrupt, and he inflates the numbers of contested delegates.
Yeah.
Somebody says, "This is the number, TR." He says, "Oh, double it or something. We're not going to fight over this number. Double it." And then, of course, they all become this great moral issue.
Yeah.
So then the progressives pack up, go across town. This is in Chicago.
Yeah.
They hold their own convention. They nominate him and Hiram Johnson, who's a big progressive guy from senator and governor. Yeah. He was governor at this time. He wasn't senator. And he is that's their ticket. And they proceed to, in the meantime, before the election, that Roosevelt, of course, gets shot.
Right.
He's in Milwaukee coming out of the Pfister Hotel, and a guy comes up near to him, pulls out a gun. He's a saloon keeper from the New York City, Lower East Side, basically. And it has these visions that McKinley has told him to, avenge myself on Roosevelt. It's like, okay. A sad case, but he'd been trailing Roosevelt. Now, one of the things I found in the book, which I've never seen mentioned.
Yeah.
Roosevelt, there was a great tragedy in New York City as Roosevelt is like 1903, 1904, called the General Slocum.
Okay.
It's a cruising boat. It's going on the Harlem River. And they were going to have a picnic probably in the wilds of the Bronx.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And it catches fire, and it just is an inferno.
Oh,
it's like the floating inferno.
Yeah.
And 1,000 women and children, largely Germans from the Lower East Side, Klein Deutschland, die.
Wow.
Die. And it's so bad that Klein Deutschland is abandoned. People are just so bummed out. They move out of the neighborhood because the stench of death is all around it. Okay. These boats were supposed to be federally inspected.
Okay. I'm guessing
Shrank, the would-be assassin of Roosevelt, lost his girlfriend on that boat.
Oh, okay.
And I've never seen that mentioned, but it's like,
yeah. A possible piece of the motive there.
So Roosevelt is shot. He's in the chest. He's prepared a rather long-winded speech, which he has folded up in his breast pocket next to his eyeglass case. And the bullet is slowed down so it doesn't go all the way into him.
Mm-hmm.
Roosevelt, because he remembered everything, like, the brain starts going, "Oh, yes, this guy told me once that if you're not spitting up blood, I better spit. Oh, no blood. Okay, I'm fine. It hasn't hit my lung yet. I can go and give this speech for another 40 or 50 minutes at the hall and he does, but
Yeah.
um, he's not going to win. Taft isn't going to win. The Republican Party is split irrevocably, and Wilson wins with a smaller percentage of the popular vote than William Jennings Bryan got in any of his three not particularly impressive runs. So
So
Roosevelt has is there's a new president. So what do you
yeah.
do? Road trip, the Amazon.
And hold on, before we get
Roosevelt
to the
goes to the
Amazon,
Amazon.
why did TR insist on running as a third party? Like today, the runner-ups, the losers, they all get behind the party standard bearer. They stick with it. Is it everybody just like learn this lesson? Why does TR say I
He
am
shouldn't
going
have
to run
even
as a third party?
primaried Taft.
Hmm?
He should have waited until 1916,
Mm,
and then he could have come back easily.
yeah.
But he just messes his political career up for a number of years because of that. There's a story that because he had made this no third term, or he wasn't
Right.
promised.
Again. Yeah.
They ask him about this as the 1912 election is gearing up, and he said, "Well, I just meant I wasn't going to run then. I mean, I could run now.
Yeah.
You see."
It's like
And then
no
he
consecutive terms.
cites an example, and he says, "If you ask a man at breakfast whether he wishes another cup of coffee,
Right.
and he says no, that does not mean he does not wish another cup of coffee for the rest of his life."
Right. This is the if TR were a lawyer, like that's how it would have played out in court, and everyone would just been rolling their eyes forever.
That's right, but he actually wasn't a lawyer.
Right. One of the few presidents who wasn't. Okay, so TR, he is just too impatient. He runs in 1912. He loses, and then you're right. Like he goes off and he's like, "Let's go on this road trip. Let's go to the Amazon." Tell me more about this. What inspires us? What's he doing down there?
It was again was supposed to be one of it mission creep.
Mission creep.
Mission creep, and actually he was sort of a missionary. Talked him into it. Some a priest, I think it was a Jesuit, had this said, you should go on this thing and get more animal, animal specimens and
Sure.
it's sort of like Africa again. But then when he gets there, they say, "Why don't you trace the source of this river?" which
who put that idea in his head? Who's they? Who is they?
I don't know who they
okay,
were,
somebody.
It was not a good idea. I mean, he almost dies.
Yeah.
I mean, he really almost dies,
Yeah.
and is considering, either saying, "Look, leave me alone. Let me. I can't make it out of here. Just leave me here to die. You guys try to make it out."
Right.
And he's considering suicide there.
Yeah.
So it's amazing he makes it back, but he's going to have effects of this. He comes back looking like hell.
You're right.
And he has effects of this off and on for the rest of his life. He is in the White House. He lost the sight in one eye from boxing.
Right. Yeah.
Which was a secret.
Yes.
And then from the Amazon, towards the end of his life, he goes into Roosevelt Hospital in New York, and he'd been having these ear infections from the Amazon, and they butcher the job. Okay.
Oh, no.
And he was in for something else, and a big, he was bleeding horribly, and they butcher the job. So by the time he's dead, by the time his life is over, he's blind in one eye and deaf in one ear, and can barely. When he leaves the hospital for the final time, he's in the hospital for months and months during the last year of his life, and he leaves in a wheelchair. Or I don't know if or they warn him. The doctors say, "You may have to spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair."
Yeah.
And he's like, if I have to run for president that way, I will. But the fact that he is such a, I guess because he's TR and he's sort of indestructible.
Right.
You can shoot him and he still keeps talking,
Right. Right.
forever.
He's this
He can
caricature.
charge up San Juan Hill and people
Yeah.
are getting killed all around him. And he's just, he's not going to die. But people don't even, very few people see just in what bad shape he is towards the end of his life.
So
And he would have been the Republican nominee in 1920. He would have been
probably.
he would have been the president.
Probably.
And he would have been progressive. He'd probably be pushing universal military service.
Huh.
Yeah, he was yelling about that towards the end.
World War One. Yeah.
Even in peacetime.
Huh.
And he basically largely the New Deal agenda he was talking about, and publicly, old age insurance and unemployment insurance, things of that nature.
So TR, he's gets shot while campaigning, almost dies, but lives because the book blocks the bullet. He goes on this Amazon trip, almost dies. He gets home from these experiences, and World War One has broken out in Europe, and now he's like, let's try to get killed again. He tries to get Wilson to send him over there. Can you tell me what was first, like, what's his take on World War One when he hears Europe is at war with itself in a big way? What's his response to that? What's his reaction?
His first public reaction is extremely Wilsonian.
Yeah.
This is the one of the more puzzling aspects of him. He's not acting like TR at first. It's like, well, great powers have to do what they have to do. I mean, look at what we've done. And so I can understand this Kaiser thing. You have to go through Belgium. You have to look at the what's good for your country. And
wow.
So we should stand behind the president and be neutral. And this does not last long. And it really blows sky high with the sinking of the Lusitania.
Mm-hmm.
He's very outraged about this. He is in Syracuse, New York, when this happens, and he's on trial because he's been sued for libel.
Right.
By the boss of the New York State Republican Party, a guy named Bill Barnes, and he beats that. He wins that case. But he's off to the races against Germany and for preparedness after that. Now Wilson is so obsessed with Wilson is Mr. Neutral in Europe.
Yeah.
And the preceding part of his administration, he's just been interfering all over the place in the Caribbean basin.
Yeah, and Mexico. Yeah.
and Haiti.
Yeah.
He sends troops to Haiti. My grandfather served in Haiti, and
wow.
Afterwards. Okay. But in Mexico, it's sending Pershing in to catch Pancho Villa.
Mm-hmm.
Taft had an embargo on arms to Mexico.
Right.
And Wilson keeps the embargo against Huerta, but not against Carranza.
Right.
So it's very unneutral. Okay. And so he's schizo on this. But in regards to Europe, it's like, I don't even want to look like I'm preparing for war.
Yeah.
There's incidents where people say, where he reads something in the paper, one of these filler things, that General so-and-so says we're preparing the war plans or war games for, which is this is what soldiers do.
Right. You
okay.
Plan. Yeah.
And he's outraged by that. We must stop this. We must not look like we're preparing for war at all. And which of course sets TR ablaze. Now in that Lusitania thing.
Yeah.
Wilson gives a speech right afterwards. He goes up to Philadelphia and he's speaking to a bunch of immigrants, new citizens. A lot of them are Germans, which whatever. Well, a lot of them were Germans back then.
Sure.
And he says there's a time when a nation can, like a man, can be too proud to fight. This really sets TR off.
Yeah.
Being too proud to fight. It's like, no, I want to fight. I want to fight everyone. I want to fight in the White House. I want to box. I want to do this.
Yeah.
And he really, he's had a death. He's kind of mellowed. Again, the irony. This is the great war lover. In the 1890s, he's talking about invading Canada, Cuba, of course.
Yep.
I don't care. If the Germans bombard New York City and reduce it to rubble, I don't care. It'll teach these Easterners to, prepare for war. It's like, okay. And, telling his sister that, I really wish we had a big war now. So he matures later in life where he makes the statement, he will do it a few times later in life. We lost no troops. We lost nobody's lives, American troops to foreign guns. Okay. Which is true. He words it very carefully because he lost people in the Philippines with the insurrection.
Oh, do you mean during his administration? He means.
Yeah, but they're not foreigners because we got them,
Yeah, the insurrection.
Yeah. So, but it's like, it's fact check, mostly true.
Right. Okay, so I'm curious about this. Well, first off, just to put things in perspective, you mentioned,
and he wins the Nobel Peace Prize. Another irony. The great war lover wins the Nobel Peace Prize.
So you mentioned he's triggered by Lusitania. I was surprised by this. Like, I feel like growing up, I felt like Lusitania happened and then we entered the war. There's a 2-year gap between that.
No. And the Germans pull back.
Right. And so for a couple of years, he's clamoring for this, but he doesn't just want the U.S. in the war. You mentioned that he's calmed down, but he's also like, he goes to Wilson to personally lobby Wilson to like give him the Rough Riders 2.0 and send him to Europe.
Oh, he petitioned Taft to go into Mexico.
Really? I didn't catch that one.
Yeah. And before he goes and sees Wilson at the White House and Wilson, they're polite, but it's like, no, we're not doing this. For a variety of reasons, he's made a number of proposals and wants to raise like volunteer forces of 100,000 soldiers to be command, and his under command under him is like, it'll be my sons and it'll be my cronies from politics. And it's like, and he says, and I want it mounted rifle battalions.
Yeah. And he's
what
like,
the hell war is he thinking of? Doesn't he get the newspapers?
Right.
This might be, this is what's going on the Eastern Front. Okay,
sure.
But it's not what's going on with 300,000 artillery shells being launched in a day at the Battle of the Somme, or trench warfare, or barbed wire.
What was he thinking? Like, he's 50
I don't
plus
know
years
what he
old.
Was thinking.
It's just him. It's just his part of his.
Just him. It's this romantic view of war, where one of his old Rough Riders about this time says, am I wrong, TR, that you kind of want to go off to the front and be killed? And TR slams his fist. Yes, that's right. And it's like, how'd you know that? Well, because you came across one of our soldiers at, San Juan Hill or wherever.
Yeah.
And he was he was down on the ground by a tree, and he's got a bullet in it, and he's not going to you could tell he's not going to make it, this soldier. And TR doesn't commiserate with him, and he goes, what a splendid way to die.
Holy smokes.
It's like, grow up. I mean, seriously, this is not healthy.
No.
And, and he does pay the price in the war.
He does.
His sons go over. His daughter goes over. His sister goes. Her sister is already in Italy, so she doesn't really go over. But His son-in-law goes over. Everyone goes over except Princess Alice. And
Yeah.
so Kermit is wounded. Archie is wounded very bad. Now I don't know if Kermit is wounded.
Okay.
Archie is wounded seriously all over his body.
Yeah.
He is the only guy who is rated. What they have these. You're given a percentage of disability,
Okay.
and Archie was rated 100% disabled in both World War I and World War II.
Wow.
He went back, and because those Roosevelts they're not cowards.
Right.
So he went back in for World War II, and of course Ted was wounded a couple of times in the war, and he dies on the beach at Normandy.
Right.
Okay, not during D-Day, but later on. He's a very brave guy. But Quentin, the youngest, is a pilot. It's like on his second combat mission
In World War One. Yeah.
World War One, Bastille Day, July 14th, 1918, and he gets a bullet right through the head. And he's buried with honors by the Germans. TR gets the word. He's of course shaken, but he's not about to give in, and he of course praises the way that his son has died in this great sacrifice. But I opened the book with TR speaking in Columbus, Ohio, and he's not confronted, but he meets the Gold Star mothers and the Gold Star parents, and they look at him and they know he's suffered the same thing. And but he does not weep, because he's a manly guy, but he has made that sacrifice. And a couple of people note that it weighed on him, that he got his war.
Yeah.
And this is the price you pay. It's not all glory. He did say to I think a minister beforehand, Quentin's dying, he said, the odds are not good that all four of them are going to come back.
Right.
But God, we trust God to do his wisest.
And this does happen. Like, he dies in 1919, so this happens within a couple years, I think, of his death. Do we get any sense months? So this happens within months of his death. Do we get any sense on if this does have an impact? Does TR change in those last few months because of after this life of invulnerability? All these.
Well, he's wearing down because he's just sick.
Right.
In 1918, he's just sick a lot. He goes into the hospital in February of 1918, Roosevelt Hospital, and he stays there for a long time, and they think he's going to die, and there's a report that he's died. And that's when he loses the hearing in one ear. And then he's very sick again on Election Day 1918. And he cancels a speaking engagement in Pittsburgh, which tells you this guy's sick. And is rushed to the hospital. He comes out just before Christmas, not because the doctors say this is a great idea, but it's like, damn it, it's Christmas. And even though most of the people are in France, whoever is around, we're going to have Christmas. And so he comes out, but he is not well. Sagamore Hill, where he lives, is looks impressive, but it was a barn. It had no real heating.
Oh, yeah.
And so he can't even be upstairs. He has to sleep like, in the hallway or something, downstairs, because near one of the fireplaces or something. It's not the most comfortable place in the world, I would suspect, in January, and it's right on the bay.
Yeah. Do we get a chance if he's changed at all who he is those last few months? His body's breaking down.
No, I think he's still pushing the same things.
Still the same guy.
And the thing which is really the same is his complete hatred of Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah.
So that when he's in the hospital,
Yeah.
he's working on plans to go against the League of Nations, even
Ah,
though on many occasions previously
yeah.
he had talked about creating an organization of nations, and at one point even called it a League of Nations.
Yeah.
So again, to quote the Marx Brothers, and Groucho sings, "Whatever it is, I'm against it." And so whatever Wilson is for, if Wilson
Yeah.
is for, and William Jennings Bryan, another guy he really
Sure.
could not stand,
Yeah.
are for our, if they get arbitration treaties through, it's like, oh, arbitration, stupid. But he had been trying to get it through when he was president. He couldn't get it through. He'd been working on things like that. And then a League of Nations, if Wilson's for it, he's against it,
So Roosevelt, he dies
he
on
dies.
January 6th, 1919, age of 62. As you mentioned, like if he'd lived, he'd probably be president again, like a
He
year
would.
later,
He
2 years
would.
later.
He's not sure whether he wants it or not. He's
Really?
not sure whether he wants it.
Huh.
Yeah, I think because of Quentin's death, and also
Mm.
because he's just,
Okay,
I
now that
mean,
sounds like a change in character because of Quentin's death.
yeah, and he's just, kind of, he's really worn out from that.
Yeah.
Today we forget just how sick he was for
Yeah.
how long then, but
Yeah.
he knew it.
Yeah.
He knew it. He knew he could barely. The day or so before he dies, it's like he can't even sign his name to a letter.
So the last question I got for you, it's the last question I ask everybody, and that's what lessons in leadership do you think we can learn from Roosevelt? And let's focus on these post-presidential years. What is the lesson from this time from him?
I think I won't quote Groucho Marx, but I will quote Douglas MacArthur, that ex-presidents should, like the old soldier in the barracks ballad, just fade away. That it's really, if not really fade away, I mean, you don't have to just vanish, but you really should sort of stay out of the fray, I think.
And what leads you to say that?
Particularly if you're as excitable as TR.
Yeah. So like if he wanted to have a long retirement, he probably should have made sure it was an actual retirement.
Well, yeah, I think, well, yes. Well, he should have not gone to the Amazon.
Right.
Somebody said that, I think, I think he said it
Yeah.
when he came back. I think this has taken 10 years off my life.
Mm-hmm.
But he also said to his sister when he was in the hospital for the last time, he says, "Remember the promise I made?" She says, "What are you talking about?" He says, "I said I would live to the fullest until I was 63. And then after that, I don't care."
Mm-hmm.
Bingo.
Yeah. If you'd like to hear more from David, please check out TR's Last War, Theodore Roosevelt, The Great War, and A Journey of Triumph and Tragedy, and give him a follow on Twitter at DPIETRUSZA.
You got it.
Thank you for your time, David.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Abridged Presidential Histories. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, tell your friends about the show, and leave a 5-star review on your podcast listening platform of choice. It's good to hear from y'all. You can also follow the show on Facebook at Abridged Presidential Histories or on Twitter at APH Podcast. If you'd like to support the show, you can look it up on Patreon or go directly to www.patreon.com/Abridged Presidential Histories. This helps me buy books and pay to host the show, and thank you so much to everyone who's contributed so far. The music in today's podcast is a public domain recording of the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. In our next episode, we will look at the life, administration, and Supreme Court career of William Howard Taft, the only person in history to serve as both President of the United States and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. It's going to rule. That's next time on Abridged Presidential Histories.